Georgia Tann was born in Mississippi in 1891. Her father, George Tann, was a powerful judge and he was very respected, very well-connected man. He was also very strict. He wanted Georgia to become a concert pianist, so she started taking piano lessons when she was very young. Georgia went on to study music. She graduated with a music degree, but music wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to become a lawyer just like her father. So she studied law and she passed the Mississippi bar exam. But her father did not allow her to practice because he did not believe that law was a suitable career for a woman. So Georgia moved into social work. She eventually started working with the Mississippi Children's Home Society. There she was responsible for receiving children and finding homes for them. This was when she met Ann Atwood. Ann was 8 years younger than Georgia and she worked at the same children's home as a house mother. She also had a young son at that time called Jack. Now, we don't know exactly when Georgia and Ann became a couple, but they remained together for the rest of Georgia's life. In 1922, Georgia adopted a baby girl and named her June Ann. But even at this early stage of her career, there were already concerns about the way Georgia handled children. In 1924, she was dismissed from the Mississippi Children's Home Society because of her child placement methods. After losing that job, Georgia moved to Memphis, Tennessee with Ann's son Jack and Georgia's adopted daughter June Ann. Now, losing her job in Mississippi should have been the end of Georgia Tann's career. Instead, it became the biggest opportunity of her life. After she was dismissed, she moved to Memphis, like I said. There, she joined the Shelby County branch of the Tennessee Children's Home Society. Its job was to care for abandoned children, find foster homes, and arrange adoptions. Many people believe that Georgia got the job with the help from her father, George Tann, because he was still a very powerful and well-connected man back home. There's no definite proof of this, but how else did she get such a good job after just getting fired? Georgia started as the branch's executive secretary. It was a good, normal job, but she was not interested in that small position. Over the next few years, she gained more and more influence inside the organization. According to later accounts, she staged a hostile takeover. She reportedly won people over to her side, pushed others aside. People inside the organization reportedly found themselves choosing sides. By the end of it, Georgia was in charge of the Memphis branch. This was in 1929. One person would become very important to Georgia Tann. Her name was George Camille Kelly. Kelly had been Shelby County's juvenile court judge since 1920. She was one of the first female juvenile court judges in the United States, and she had the power to decide whether children should be taken away from their families or not. She had that power. Now, Georgia and Judge Kelly developed a very close working relationship. If a child appeared before Judge Kelly's court, she could declare that that child was neglected and place them in the care of the Tennessee Children's Home Society. Once that happened, that child was now in Georgia Tann's hands. So Georgia had the courts on her side now, but she needed more allies. So Georgia built relationships with doctors, nurses, hospitals, maternity workers, court officers. This woman was networking. Before long, they became a steady source of information about children whose families were poor, vulnerable, or struggling. Some mothers were approached to sign over their children while they were still pregnant. Others were pressured into signing papers shortly before giving birth or shortly after giving birth. Sometimes they had not even finished recovering. But everything looked real. The courts, the paperwork, the hospitals, the children's home, the adoptions. Newspapers praised the organization. Charities raised money for it. Wealthy families trusted it. I mean, why wouldn't they? If you were in Memphis, there was no obvious reason not to trust Georgia Tann. Nobody looking at Georgia Tann from the outside was seeing a child trafficker. They were looking at a respected woman who was helping children. And that's exactly how she wanted it. Georgia Tann discovered something. There were wealthy couples across America who desperately wanted children, especially healthy white babies. And many people were willing to pay large amounts of money to adopt them. At the time, adoptions in Tennessee cost around $7, but through private out-of-state adoptions, Georgia reportedly charged wealthy families as much as $5,000 for a child. Officially, the money was meant to cover things like medical care, legal paperwork, transport. But the more children Georgia placed, the more money came into the organization and the more money she made for herself. And that created a terrible incentive. She always needed more children. So where did those children come from? Some of those children came from unmarried mothers. At that time, having a baby outside of marriage carried enormous shame. Many young women were sent away from home during pregnancy. They were hidden from neighbors. Sometimes they were even hidden from other family members. And Georgia knew that. So some of these women were pressured into signing surrender papers while they were still pregnant. Some didn't even fully understand what they were signing. They were ashamed, under pressure. Honestly, they just wanted the baby out of the way for now. Some believed that they might see their baby again. Georgia would convince them that this was temporary until, they could make up their minds properly. But they never saw those babies again. In some cases, there were no papers at all. Mothers were just told that their babies had died. Others were told that their baby had been adopted, and there was simply nothing that anybody could do to bring back the baby. But newborn babies were not the only children that Georgia wanted. She also wanted, like toddlers. She looked for children whose parents were struggling. Maybe a father has lost his job, the mother might be alone raising children, a family too poor to put enough food on the table. Georgia saw these families as opportunities to get more children. With Judge Kelly on the bench, removing a child could appear completely legal. Parents would find themselves accused of neglect, not necessarily because they had abused their children, but because they were very poor and they were going through a difficult time. Then Judge Kelly would just declare, no, you can't take care of your child. They would remove custody of your child from you and hand the child over to the Tennessee Children's Home Society. On paper, it was legitimate. Then the scary part, some children were simply kidnapped. Records describe children as being kidnapped from the front of their homes, from their schools, just off the streets. Some parents never saw their children again. Georgia Tann was kidnapping kids. Once a child entered Georgia's system, their identity was changed. Many were given new names. Some had their birth records altered. They changed their birthdays. It made it hard for the real families to ever trace them again. Brothers and sisters were often separated, adopted to different families in different states so that they would never find themselves again. By now, Georgia's operation had grown far beyond Tennessee. Most of the children that she placed were adopted by families in other states. The people adopting these children were mostly wealthy and well-connected people. Some of her clients included Hollywood stars like Joan Crawford, June Allison, Dick Powell, Pearl S. Buck, and New York Governor Herbert Lehman. Georgia did not hide what she was doing. She was traveling across the country giving lectures about adoption. She was highly respected. She even met Eleanor Roosevelt and President Harry Truman. Every Christmas, she advertised babies like Christmas gifts. She encouraged families to adopt. You could buy raffle tickets and win a baby. The adoption fees were huge for the time, and investigators later alleged that Georgia kept most of that money for herself. Basically, the only criteria for getting a child from Georgia Tann was money. She only cared about the money. Now, every child that Georgia took wasn't immediately adopted. They had to advertise them first. They had to find families that were willing to pay for them. Many spent days, weeks, even months inside of that Tennessee Children's Home Society while they waited to be placed. For some children, that was where the proper nightmare started. Former residents that survived it, they described overcrowded rooms, poor sanitation. These children were swimming in diseases, okay? Food was scarce, medical care was neglected, and children who became sick, Georgia did not bother to get them the treatment that they needed. And then it was later found out that children who were considered unlikely to be adopted because maybe they were older, disabled, or maybe the wrong skin color, they were left without proper care. Many of them did not survive. They left them to just starve to death. Some survivors claimed that children were given drugs to keep them quiet or easier to control. The full extent of these allegations have never been fully proven. Hundreds of children are believed to have died while in Georgia Tann's care, many from illnesses that could have been treated easily. At least 19 of those children were buried in unmarked graves in Elmwood Cemetery in Memphis. They were only identified by names like Baby Estelle, Baby Joseph. Historians believe that many more babies died. Maybe they were cremated. Who knows? For years, nobody seemed able to stop Georgia Tann. People complained, families complained, questions were asked, but nothing happened. Untouchable Georgia. Then her world slowly started falling apart. The Child Welfare League of America withdrew its approval of the Tennessee Children's Home Society after raising serious concerns about the way it was being run. Probate Judge Samuel D. Bates had seen enough too. He started asking some very difficult questions about how these children were ending up in Georgia's care in the first place. Those questions eventually reached the Tennessee's new governor, Gordon Browning. In 1950, he ordered a full investigation and appointed Memphis attorney Robert L. Taylor to find out what had really been going on. After more than 2 decades, somebody was finally paying attention to this woman's operations. The investigation uncovered years of abuse. Huge amounts of money had changed hands. This was a black market adoption business. But Georgia Tann never stood trial. She died of cancer in September of 1950. This was just 3 days before charges were due to be filed against the Tennessee Children's Home Society. George Camille Kelly retired soon afterwards. No charges were filed against her. The Tennessee Children's Home Society was shut down, yet nobody was ever criminally convicted for what had happened. A few months later, the state of Tennessee sued Georgia Tann's estate, and they recovered part of the money that they believed was made through this operation. But for thousands of children and their families, justice never really came. Most of the adoptions were never undone. Parents who had spent years searching for their children rarely got them back, and many of those children grew up never really knowing who they were. And I need us to remember that even though it was celebrities that adopted many of these kids, we don't know where many of the others ended up. Were they adopted for the sole purpose of abuse? Were they killed, tortured? We don't know. These are all allegations. But then Georgia's partner, Ann Atwood, stayed with her for the rest of her life. In 1943, Georgia legally adopted Ann, which is a strange step, but that was a step that same-sex couples took in those days so that their partners could inherit property since they couldn't marry. When Georgia died, Ann became the executor of her estate and she inherited everything. Georgia Tann is believed to have taken more than 5,000 children. Her case changed adoption laws across America, and it remains one of the largest child trafficking scandals in American history. One thing I couldn't help thinking about while researching this case was Jeffrey Epstein. Not because the two cases are the same, they are not. They're very different cases. But in both cases, the central figure in an alleged trafficking operation died before a court could fully hold them accountable. Both cases also involve allegations that powerful people were connected to the network. Is that a coincidence or not? I don't know. I'll leave that to you. I don't know. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, please don't forget to follow me. I tell these stories all the time on all my social media. Thanks.